Boom. We are live. Trick Judge Thursday this week, guys. Hope everybody is well. We got a good one. I'm just going to get this going. Sometimes I'll pause for a bit, but why? Why do that? Okay. Let me get this here. This is 59. All right. What's good, y'all? This is C-Certified Brewhead, and welcome to episode 59 of Beer and Other Shit, the podcast, Adjunct Series Quarantine Edition. This evening, we have another incredible episode with phenomenal guests, but before we bring them in, we have got to show love to our sponsor once again, Dr. Nick's Amazing Man Stuff. These guys are a beard product company out of Massachusetts. These guys are phenomenal. So if we had a podcast with the owner, Nick, Dr. Nick, I don't know if he's really a doctor, a few weeks ago, and he sort of broke it all down. So essentially these guys are all American-made essential oils, like the expensive stuff, no cheap fragrance oils that irritate your skin. They make predominantly beard oil with a series called Beard Beer that are actually modeled after beers, IPA and stout so far. And they're working with super large breweries in the States, Lawson's, Treehouse, Trillium, Vitamin C, stuff like that, to actually create beer oils based on their beers. But this evening I want to specifically talk about, I've been trying to, highlight a different product each week. This is their beard stick or beard balm, their signature series. This stuff is pretty dope, yo. I never really heard of this before, and I never used. Oh, there's a hair on there. That's gross. Anyway, I can see it. Basically, a little stick. You see, I'm actually using this shit. I've been using this stuff since January, and I'm not a beard product guy, but I've been loving this stuff. So basically, this one is their number 7 scent. They have a 7 and a 9. It says lemon, lime zest, citrus fruit, and pine. It's super, super dope. They get all of their essential oils from Hawaii, from a Reiki master who blesses it and shit. It's super cool. Nick said he likes pairing this one with their IPA beer, which is you put the oil on first and then you just kind of scrape this on. Best part about the beard balms though is the hair apparently only takes what it needs, so you can go nuts and put it on, but it'll just stop taking it. The hair just takes what it requires. So I've been really enjoying these and mixing up the scents and stuff. And I'll talk about probably these ones next week. The other beard oils, but definitely go grab them. The link is in our description. We have a discount, BAOS 21, and that'll get you 15% off your order. They ship everywhere. I think it's free shipping if orders over $40 within North America at least. So definitely worth it. Super cool people, hyper local. They have a craft beer mentality. We don't do sponsor stuff basically at all, really. It's very few and far between. So when we do it because we believe in it. So with that said, check them out. Now, this evening, this is an episode, I think I tried to get this going a few years ago and the timing didn't work. Obviously, this is not how we prefer to bring someone on for the first time, but we do what we work with what we got. So this evening, mate, get ready, get your beers ready. We have Dan from Le Castor and Noah from Beerism in the building. Boys, welcome. How you doing?
Good. Yourself?
Thanks for having me on.
Delightful. Man. Genuine pleasure, man. Noah, welcome back. It's been a minute.
It has
been too long. And Dan, it's overdue, my bro. I'm glad to finally get you on. You guys have, been extraordinarily impactful in Quebec. So it's great to finally get that, the story firsthand. Sorry, continue, sir.
Yeah, well, it's been a while. It's been a long time coming, hasn't it?
It has.
We talked about it years ago, and ironically, it takes a pandemic to bring us together. So,
isn't that the way?
Yeah. So, no, we're really glad to finally have a chance to do more of a long format chat.
Yes, definitely. And being that you and Noah already had a relationship, and he's been one of your big proponents, around me, and you're always showing love to your stuff, and really made me understand the impact what you had. So it kind of made sense to have Noah on tonight. So get a bit of a different perspective. So I'm genuinely excited for this chat, and I'm also excited to crack the beer. So we have a nice lineup, Dan. So you are not participating, which I respect, but
yeah,
I am. God damn it.
Nice.
Tell us about this one, man. We're starting with the crispy boy, obviously.
Well, yeah. So you guys are having Kazbek. I can, so yeah. I mean, I guess for people that don't know the brewery, we started a series last fall.
Okay.
Called the Progression Series, and it was kind of in response to the way we feel the market's been evolving over the last few years.
Right.
And we've always been a brewery that's kind of not put out dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of new releases a year. We kind of put them out on a less regular basis, and our whole philosophy behind the brewery from day one has been to because we're not open to the public and we don't sell any product, any beer on site directly to consumers.
Mm-hmm.
It's 100% through a distribution network. We had this kind of mindset of, if we introduce a new brand, that we want to be able to distribute that across our entire network properly, so that everyone in Quebec has a chance, has a crack at all of our beer lineup. And so that's why we don't have hundreds of beers in our portfolio. We're pretty conservative in terms of how many new beers we put out per year.
Right.
But the last few years, I mean, the landscape in craft beer has really evolved. It's really changed quite a bit. I mean, people have always been the excitement of chasing down new beers. It's always been there since we've opened, and I'm sure long before that. We opened in 2012, but lately it seems that the culture for newness and new offerings has really gone into kind of overdrive. So we were kind of holding ourselves back, long story short, because of our approach to distributing beers and wanting to make sure every beer we put out is properly distributed to all of our customers. We kind of had to get out of our own way a little bit and change our mindset, and because we did want to experiment more. We wanted to take advantage of newer hops that are coming to market. We're seeing huge experimentation, kind of exponential amounts of new hop varieties that are coming onto the marketplace. It's amazing. The hop breeders are now almost like microbreweries. It seems like they're putting out a new hop every month.
It's true,
and it's hard to keep up, but it's also really interesting. It's a fascinating evolution to what's happened, and we just kind of felt like we were a bit too much on the outside looking in. We're trying to distribute the beers we put out fully. It's kind of a noble idea, or it was, to us, because we didn't want to leave anyone out, essentially. But we just had to say, listen, like, that's going to kind of get in the way of us trying out new hop varieties, trying out new ideas, and just we wanted to set up a platform where we could do that, and also essentially fail, have ideas go to market, and if they weren't a total success, that's cool. So we set up a label that's basically the same label design for every beer, and all we do is we change the name of the beer and the colors of the label. And so we're not investing basically all this time in artwork for every single time we want to put out a new beer, because sometimes you can put quite a lot of effort into the artwork. You're really happy with it. You got a nice concept for the beer and the name and the art and everything. You spent hours and hours, and then, let's be honest, the beer doesn't do what you'd hoped it would do in the marketplace, and you're like, well, we're not going to brew that one again.
Right.
So we wanted a platform where it's okay to not kill it with every single offering. It's like we're trying out new ideas, we're trying out new ingredients, and the risks and consequences to doing that were less for the brewery, essentially. And obviously the flip side is, we get to share these experiments and ideas with beer drinkers. So that's kind of where the whole Progression series came about, is we just felt like we weren't connecting enough with beer consumers and moving quickly enough. So
that's super interesting.
Yeah, so I don't know if that jives with what you guys have seen in the marketplace
100%, bro.
as well over the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about what you guys did, and I mean between me and circles of beer friends and whatever, there was always. I like how you put that there was like a nobility to it almost, and I kind of felt that way in the sense that you were producing such quality stuff that you could actually just go get pretty much any time you wanted. And the distro was so good that like I saw Saison Rayé sitting in a Super C or something, and I was just like, wow, this is a
Yeah.
shelfie, you know what I mean? Like that's really something.
Yeah.
When we live in this climate where if people are like trading their grandmothers in to get the latest Oval Saison,
Worth
when
it.
in our backyard we had Saison Rayé, which in my opinion is up there. I'm not gonna say which one I like more, but like it's not far off. If it, you know what I mean, like it's the same spectrum. So there was always like I always had a respect for the fact that you guys could do that and that you did it well. But like as you said, the climate's changed more and more. People are pumping out beers every week that are brand new. So yeah, it makes sense that you took that step. But I think what you're doing, and I'm seeing it with a lot of other breweries too, is you're kind of going somewhere in between where you're having a series that you can save a bit of money on the artwork and whatever, and then experiment. And I think the culture of beer geeks right now allows for a certain level of failure because I think there's a mutual understanding that you can't pump out perfection every 2 weeks. So I think if someone goes out and buys one of the progressive series and they're like, oh, I don't love that, I don't think it taints your brand like it might have, I don't know, a decade ago, or if it even did back then, I don't know. But I feel like the culture is a bit more accepting of that now. And
Yeah.
also, this is great.
And you can definitely, oh, well, cheers.
Genuinely.
You can definitely take it too far, can't you? I mean,
Yeah.
this platform we created is a lot of fun, and it's allowing us to get these ideas out. But we're also conscious of the fact that there has to be some fatigue on the part of the consumer too. And I wouldn't like we've had a couple months this year where we put out like 3 new beers or something in a month. Like for us, that's outrageous. Like in the history of the brewery, we've never done that.
Right.
But some breweries, that's a normal month. They put out 1 or 2 brands a week. Especially maybe breweries that only sell to the public. It's just the way they do business, and you can't push it too far. And I do sympathize. Like there's sometimes when I'm about to hit post on Facebook, and I'm just like, man, sorry, post. And then you see the comments, and you're just like, damn, like there goes whatever, however many dollars this week. And I can feel a bit of the fatigue from certain people out, who are buying beers on a regular basis. And here we are kind of contributing to that proliferation and that super saturated market. So I am aware that we're part of the problem, but at the same time, it is what it is. This is the market we live in. And so that's where it comes from. We're gonna keep doing it as long as it's useful. Already in the series, I think we started in October or November. I think we have, I want to say 8 beers that we've put on this progression series label. And there's already 2 or 3 that we're kind of thinking we could divert over to have now their own proper identity. Cool. So they'll have their own label, their own name and identity. And then, they might not become a full-time beer. It's likely they won't. Well, I shouldn't say that. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but they'll at least be a rotating, and they'll have their own identity. So we'll take them off the progression label and put them into their own proper identity. So that's kind of the idea. It's kind of like, it's a bit of a minor leagues or whatever you want to call it, or a proving ground for certain ideas. And if they prove, if they produce a bit of a loyal following, then we'll take it from there. So I've noticed other breweries have also recently done similar things. So I don't think it's not a unique idea by any means. And it looks like other brewers are having, similar thoughts. I've seen it from a couple, big microbreweries in Quebec as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, man, I love it. I think it's dope. There's a couple comments even, like Guillaume saying Team Castor. I knew there'd be some fans coming through tonight. And Hop Citizen, what's up, bro? He said loving the progression series. I definitely agree that I think that I wouldn't worry too much about the saturation or that, like contributing towards that, being that your volume is so small. I think it's what you're doing is keeping that excitement in the brand by offering something fun and new and small batch that, whilst like Noah said, you can get these incredible beers year round that people obviously always love. There is that appetite for something new in beer, wherever the hell that came from. So I think all you're doing is playing a small role in just being like, well, you do have to play that game. It's a business at the end of the day. But you're just like, you're dribbling stuff out. And it's like you said, you did 3 in 1 month, which was unheard of. Most of those breweries that you're referring to do 4 a week. So, it's not even in the same conversation, I would say.
No, that's it. It is. It's just, it's quite a lot for us. But again, like we've come from the absolute end of the spectrum where you produce fewer beers, but you distribute the heck out of all of them, and every customer in Quebec gets it.
Yeah.
And now, these progression beers, they're still widely available. They still go to the 4 corners of Quebec. They're not held back from any regions. It's just that you're not going to see them in every IGA and Metro and the bigger stores. They're going to be in all the specialty dippeners and the IGAs and Metros that might want them.
Right.
So they are still well distributed. But like I said, it's just more about, being a fertile ground for experimentation and trying out new ingredients. So yeah, the first couple that we put out were New England style IPAs. And then I think perhaps the one you're drinking now came out, the Kazbek.
Okay.
The other thing, part of trying out new ingredients for us is actually for the first time in the brewery's history is using non-organic ingredients. So
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah. So basically, like a good portion of the progression beers they use 100% organic ingredients. But again, I didn't want to go through the process of officially certifying them organic, because the whole idea is speed, flexibility, get it to market fast, right? And doing the paperwork for that just didn't fit in. So some of you have to read the ingredients to see if it's 100% or not organic. It says in the ingredients.
Gotcha.
So the Kazbek, for example, that you're drinking is using hops we've never had the chance to use before, because we've never seen them inorganic. So Kazbek, there's also Sladek in there too, and Saz late. So I guess it's a derivative of Saz, and again, in the spirit of trying to really highlight the ingredients, we dry hop that beer. We don't dry hop our standard Pilsner, so the one that's our core beer Pilsner. We used to, but we don't do that anymore. This one actually gets a decent sized dry hop, kind of similar to what we put in our session IPA. Not an insignificant dry hop.
You can tell.
And again, we're just like, why not? It might be leaning, you could argue it's maybe leaning a bit too much towards hoppiness rather than, the crispy malt side, but that's okay. It's, that was the intention of the beer, was to say, hey, what happens with these hops, the noble style hops, if you can use them in slightly higher quantities and, see what happens. So, that was the idea behind that beer. But in terms of the actual kind of grain bill and whatnot, it's pretty similar to our standard Pilsner that's on the market.
What I really like about this one is it really showcases something that obviously we're used to that Saz profile in a Pilsner or whatever, and I think we've all had like India Pale Lagers or dry hop pills or whatever, but there's something about this that is unique in a way that I don't think I've experienced before. It's like it has that noble herbal component, but there's a fruitiness I can't put my finger on, that it's hard to even describe.
Yeah, they're,
It's
they're
like a
interesting
it's like a
hops.
slight grassy, earthy, almost
Yeah.
like a
It's supposed to say that.
not like a fresh cut lawn in the way that you get in IPAs sometimes, but almost like walking
Yeah.
through a forest or something after it rains. Like there's really
Jeez.
something there. Yeah, you like that?
Yeah,
eh?
it's a
That's
very,
good.
it's kind of a very, very quenching beer. It's yeah, it's interesting. The Saz Late is kind of known for a bit more of the hoppy aromatics. And then yeah, you do get those sort of grassy, vegetal, more kind of noble characters
Hmm.
from the Kazbek. So yeah, it's
Where's Kazbek
just really
from?
different. Well, these are all from the Czech Republic.
Oh, Czech. Okay.
Yeah, where was I believe it was started there. I can't remember. I put the information on our Facebook post, and that's been a while now, so I don't remember.
Yeah, bro. It's fascinating.
But
I
yeah,
like-
they're but so yeah, they're not organic hops. So this was I think one of the first beers we used without organic hops. Other than our Aussie Land. Aussie Land has some, which is a New England style IPA with Australian hops. It's very hard. I don't even think Australian hops. I haven't seen them in organic, so we had to reduce the certification of that beer. I think to 92% is Aussie Land.
Still
So
good.
basically, this is another kind of shift we've had to make mentally towards the fall of last year or maybe summer of last year. Was do we want to keep accepting the restriction of not having certain ingredients because they're unavailable in organic, and again due to wanting to do new things and to work with new ingredients and also stay part of a vibrant market, we just said, look, we're just going to have to go down that path, and we think that's fine because 99% of what comes out of the brewery is still certified organic. But to try out hops from Australia or Balaton cherries from Michigan, or these new varieties of hops from Czech Republic, we have to accept that, well, we just can't get them in organic. So that's something that we decided to do.
I love that.
With regard to organic, obviously in Quebec, you were either the first or one of the first to do organic beers, and I can imagine that the prices for the ingredients are higher than non-organic, and I don't recall if what you charge the public reflects that, like in the sense of, is your standard blah 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 the same, a little bit pricier than the other breweries standard blah blah blah. But I imagine at this point, with IPAs becoming so expensive, or beer in general, have you had to kind of make concessions with that? Because I don't find that your New Englands are particularly more expensive than others on the market. So I was just curious, like, did you have to kind of make concessions, or did you just are you just charging like slightly more now, or did you ever at all? I mean, I don't even know.
No, I mean, we from day one, we made a decision with the brewery, my partner and I. I mean, okay, like for like, organic ingredients are going to cost more, right? That's just a fact. But I have to be honest with you. Something that we saw on the market is there does seem to be some gouging by companies that put out organic stuff, and it if it's a small bespoke farm, mom and pop farm, then that's totally fair, right? But when you see, I don't know, I don't want to throw a big name under the bus, but let's say Tostitos. Okay, now they have organic salsa, and all of a sudden it's 40% more than the non-organic salsa. You don't think Tostitos has unbelievable buying power? So it kind of irritated us when you go into the stores and it's just like, really, like 50 to 60% more on occasion for organic, whatever the product was. So we said right off the bat that we decided to be organic just for philosophical reasons. That's it. We never talk about it. We never trumpet it. We don't. It's just there on the label in a small word. It says organic. We don't talk about it. We don't like using it as some sort of marketing messaging. It's just what we want to do. So, but we knew that the vast majority of consumers were not going to be. They wouldn't find that part, compelling enough if the beer wasn't really good. We wanted to take away every reason that people might have for not buying the beer, essentially. So, like, if we started in 2012 and we had really good beer, but it's like $2 more a bottle than the other beer. That's we wanted to take away that reason. We were like, we don't want these hurdles because nobody knew who we were. We didn't want hurdles in the way of the consumer. So we said, whatever we do, we got to price our beer in the middle of the road. So not the most expensive. At that time, there was one or two breweries in Quebec that were kind of the high end of the price spectrum. And then there were others, obviously, there were quite, there's some breweries that have excellent price points in Quebec too. We wanted to be in the middle, somewhere fair. And we decided that it would be our job to grow and become efficient enough to ease our way into that price so that it's profitable, rather than charging some ridiculously high price and saying, well, we need to charge that because we're small. Well, the market doesn't care if you're small. The market wants value. So we put a decent value price on the product, and it's our job to make sure we can get there and become profitable at that price point. That's always been our philosophy. We've never looked at what the ingredients cost, or the organic malt went up this year, or hops just went up. We've never ever looked at that. We've always thought that it's our job to grow enough and to be efficient enough so that the pricing works, because the consumer just doesn't care, and they shouldn't care about the struggles we have sourcing ingredients or the fact that the organics are more expensive. They really don't care. It's not their problem. That's not the dialogue you're having with the consumer. The dialogue is we're trying to engage them through compelling products. That's it. Like, we want them to be excited about trying the product, not having to make a value-based decision. Well, this is really, really, really expensive. Should I do it or not? We just want to take that right out of the kind of process, the buying process. So that's always been our philosophy about pricing. Plus, as we've gotten bigger, obviously you can start to get economies of scale. So we have much better economy of scale than a new brewery. So our pricing in organics is probably better than what they're doing in conventionals. We're buying our base malt in bulk now. We have a silo, so that's a kind of a helpful stepping stone you get to when you have the space and enough volume to do it. If you have, you buy certain amounts of hops and you have contracts and things like that, you kind of lock in your pricing. Whereas if you're a smaller brewery and you don't have contracts, you're going to be buying from the spot market, which is whatever's available at that given time from whichever seller or reseller. So the prices, I've seen prices that are quite a bit higher in the spot market for conventionals than we pay for our contracted organics. And mind you, we have some pretty massive contracts. So, maybe it's not a fair comparison, but those are the things that help us. So right now, it's all about pricing the product to where we think it should be in the marketplace. But it is tough. It is tough because everything goes up every year. And as a brewery, we don't like price increases. So we didn't have a single price increase from 2012 to when we switched to cans. Our bottles were the same price. So exactly the same price for 6 or 7 years. We absorbed every single price increase because we just felt that, the beer's expensive enough, and we're selling in bombers, and it was kind of, it started to become a less desirable format, we could say, putting it lightly. I mean, that's a whole other discussion, bottles and cans.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're very resistant to putting prices up. We think our beer is expensive enough as it is, so we don't want it any more expensive than it is. So we have to figure out ways to, to be efficient, as a brewery, and that's what we try to do.
Love it. What I want to do, run through some quick comments here, and then maybe we'll jump back to the beginning of the story, because I think it'd be good to get some context for folks who might not know. But obviously, there's a lot of people tuning in right now, so this is great. So Benoit is saying, you have to buy Castor. Everything they put out is a class act. Balanced and very well executed. I brought so many people to craft beer with Yakima, which is great. Yes. Dwayne is like me as well, Benoit. A lot of my friends got into it because I fed them Yakima, on tap advices way back, which is dope. Benoit also saying thank you for not gouging in the prices. Guillaume says Castor price is always on point. Saison Rayé, for example, that Noah was talking about before, all the barrel-aged stuff, quality for price is crazy, and which is fantastic. And Ben was saying agreed, it's a solid price point following more the GDCL model, brewing great beer at a fair price. So I mean, look, everything you just sort of spoke about in detail, Dan, is not going unnoticed by the people.
It is not.
Please go.
No, it's nice. It's nice to hear that. Definitely. I mean, we don't get that feedback that often. We'll get feedback about the beer itself, but not that often about pricing. So yeah, no, we're committed to, I mean, we'd love the beer to be less expensive, but yeah. There you go. It's and even the wild beers too, like they've stayed the same price since we started doing them, and no intention of raising those prices. It's just yeah. I mean, you guys have seen some breweries. You've seen some crazy. If you've been to the U.S. and had beer down there, I mean, we went down to California a few years ago. My partner and I. And to check out our brew house we were buying for our expansion in 2017, I think. And we visited, as many breweries as we could in the area. And that 500 ml bottle, we were seeing, often $20, even up to $30 American for that bottle, with wild beer of a similar style, and often,
it's crazy.
Maybe not the highest quality, and that's something that we max out our pricing at $9.99 on those bottles, Canadian. So whatever that, $8, and we were seeing regularly in the 20s to mid 20s for that from breweries. So there is a certain degree of people are charging what they can get away with, and I get that. But yeah, it's just not something we want to subscribe to. So
yeah.
There you go.
I get it. Just before we get to the history, Guillaume just asked, any plans to bring back Saison Racao, Moine Ferrell, Kleinweiss, or Sanctuaire?
Oh, nice. Yeah, some of the those were some of our earlier wild side beers.
We've had a bunch of them.
The Saison Racao. I mean, give you guys the unvarnished truth. I mean, that was a clean side beer. That was a dry hop saison that we were producing in our 660 ml bombers before we switched to cans, and that helped lead to a pretty big recall that we had at the brewery. That pesky saison yeast, it's great stuff, but it's also, you have to respect it. And we're really good about separating. We have two breweries, in fact. We have a wild side brewery, and then we have the clean side brewery, and so we have all the equipment on the wild side stays there. We have bottling lines and pumps and hoses and everything, tanks. Nothing comes over to the clean side. The work comes from the clean side, but that's it. And the Saison Racao, and also we did another one called Provision Mosaic, another dry hop saison. They were clean side, but with saison. Saison yeast is essentially, you have to treat it like a Brett. It's a diastatic yeast, and it can wreak havoc in the brewery. And cause bottles and cans to explode. So that was the reason that we don't see those two beers. They would now be in cans, but saison yeast is banned from the clean side of the brewery now. So all saison that we produce has to be by law, our laws, done on the wild side. So the reason we haven't seen them on the wild side is because we have a hoppy wild beer called Colorado. And we had one before that called Farmhouse Houblon. And
Yeah.
the challenge on the wild side when you're doing hoppy saisons, what we found anyway, is that after a couple months in the bottle, they tend to converge towards a similar point. The way the Brett and saison yeast interacts with hops, it often doesn't matter which hops we put in, but after a certain amount of time in the bottle, we're getting some similar aromatics. So because we already have a hoppy style wild beer, Colorado, I just felt like it'd be a bit redundant to bring Saison Racao onto the wild side. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but that's the reason, to answer that question, why that beer is not in our lineup anymore. Kleine Weiss was a Berliner Weiss. That was a brief flirtation with Berliner Weiss, and kind of decided, no, we'll leave that one to other people. Didn't just, it was interesting, a good summer thirst quenching low alcohol beer, but just, wasn't 100% pleased with the end result in terms of the complexity level. Maybe the beer's not, that's not really what that beer style is about, but that was something we were trying to achieve with it. And that's why that one's not around, but it's possible it could come back, possibly in a fruited iteration, who knows? So yeah.
Thank you. I love it. That's a good answer. I noticed it's Noah was reminding me that it is time for the next one. We'll get to this history eventually.
Yeah.
Tell us about this one, dude. This is interesting. A West Coast lager.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a similar base beer with a bit more alcohol to our standard Pilsner.
Okay.
Which is it's almost all just organic Pilsner malt and then a touch of Vienna, I believe.
Okay.
It's just hopped with American, Pacific Northwest hop varieties. Just wanted to see, how those hops would express themselves in a slightly different environment, yeast environment.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, it's maybe we picked the bad name for the beer on the West Coast. I don't know, man. It's like it does feel like sometimes West Coast is a bit of a dirty word, but
not anymore. Not from you guys.
Kind of how East Coast was when West Coast was reigning supreme over the landscape. Yeah, it's just supposed to be, again, it's kind of got, medium dry hopping levels, kind of like our session IPA. Really nothing too complicated about it. Just trying to express those hops with the underlying, Pilsner beer. It's I don't know. We like it at the brewery, but it, to be honest, it doesn't sell as well as even kind of more standard Pilsners or hoppy American style, IPA ales. It's a funny thing, kind of like the whole hoppy lager thing. I remember when we started, there were breweries in the US doing IPLs, and they were causing quite a stir. But I don't know about the whole IPL thing. That's why we didn't name it an IPL. It was we just said West Coast lager and left it at that. Just kind of didn't want to bring the India Pale Ale kind of moniker into the mix. So yeah, that's just, again, one of our base beers that we like to produce, and but it has its fan base, but it definitely is a smaller group of people that go to those, that style of beer, compared to obviously Yakima West Coast IPA, or obviously the newer New England style IPA.
I love it. Yeah, it's great. This is super interesting. I don't technically know I love IPLs. I don't know if I could probably identify one in a blind tasting or anything, but This is it's a total different vibe from the Kazbek. It's I mean, maybe
Yeah.
Noah will have a flowery description of it, but is it like is it like swinging from tree to tree in a Nicaraguan valley or something? Like it's great, nice and
Yeah,
floral.
exactly.
no.
You nailed it. You nailed
Yeah.
it.
Like it's just fantastic.
No,
I mean,
this
you don't
is,
taste the booze either. Like 6% normally that's harder to hide in these type of. Sometimes even at 6, I've drank these beers, and you can taste it, and I always find that frustrating. But this is great. Sorry, no, continue.
No, I was just gonna say, I think I could be wrong, but I think IPLs or dry hop lagers or whatever combination of lager and some kind of more
the grain bill
apparent
from an
hop
IPA?
profile will probably. I think it's going to get a bit more popular again in the next couple of years with that kind of resurgence of lagers. Wouldn't surprise me. I know there's a couple of breweries that are just opening right now that I think are going to be doing versions of them. Lupulin and like Melon and a couple others that are just opening up are probably going to be doing them. So I don't know. And Cinq Baron's done what, 2 or 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to come back. It's too bad that it's not one of your higher sellers because it's a solid beer, and it's always been a fun style. It gives you a little bit of that crispness with a little bit of that fruitiness, and it's just easy to drink in general.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I think the name was a bad idea, but just to give you an example, we released another West Coast IPA, actually only our second West Coast IPA we've put out, which is funny, last month. And and there's some you see in the comments, some people are saying, it's West Coast, it's not for me. I'm not even going to try that. And that's a little bit what the name does to the beer. Because I think there are some possibly people that have really only been into craft beer for a few years. West Coast IPA or West Coast style beers are really not on their radar. They haven't really kind of gotten into them, or don't know. They really are much more into hazy IPAs. So and it's a bit unfortunate because I still find that West Coast IPA is as valid now as it ever has been. And I think that, I see also in the comments from people that maybe have a bit more experience that they're going back to those styles. There's just a certain kind of timeless classic nature to a good West Coast IPA that, it's not going to give you palate fatigue maybe, and hop fatigue and all these sort of things, and just, destroy the back of your tongue from hop burn and whatever other good things can happen on massively hopped New England style IPA. So
they're just great with food too.
Like I said, it just does seem like West Coast has it just seems a bit like a dirty word sometimes, and it's just a shame, right? So I think people will come back to it. The West Coast style is obviously, Yakima, in terms of all the beers we produce, up until recently, was still reigning supreme over our sales. Long after New England IPA had kind of taken over the market. So, I think maybe in our case it's a little bit different because we were into the Quebec marketplace with a West Coast IPA, very early, and that can really have a big effect on the longevity and the legs that beer has for the brewery. So we're quite lucky that Yakima is still, the most important beer we produce.
Which is a great point. On that note, maybe we should go back to the beginning then. Do you want to maybe... It's okay. It's only 45 minutes. No, because the convo is good, right? Like, I want to... I just feel like maybe some context for some folks who, I see some people in the comments. I know Beer and the Bozos out there in Ontario, and he's asking some questions as well. But so maybe, Dan, maybe break down your beer history, how you got into beer, and then how that came into, the brewery actually opening. And then I'd love to, even going on from there, hear like the Yakima story and from your perspective, because that was a beer that impacted both Noah and myself very heavily on, particularly when I moved to Quebec in 2012, which was when you opened. I would have tried either that year or the next year. And at the time, obviously, that was, you wanted your tongue punched in by a bitter hop, and that did the trick. So it was, it was a super important beer for a lot of people who are drinking now, and so I'm sure that would be a valuable story.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so the brewery launched in 2012, in June 2012, and my partner Murray and I guess, I mean, we're trained traditional timber frame carpenters before we got into making beer, and had a traditional timber framing company. We started in Quebec in 2002. And, Murray and I are, we've known each other since high school. And we ended up, going over to Europe to learn how to make these traditional timber frame structures. We learned kind of the old medieval techniques of working with wood, working on historic monuments and 500-year-old buildings, and doing, pretty wild projects in England, Scotland, and Wales, and some other countries. And then came back and just, decided we wanted to start a business in Quebec, because there weren't that many people doing this kind of work in Quebec. And that's what we did in 2002. And we were, I was a carpenter for life, and so was my partner. I mean, we just figured out, this is what we're going to do. We got a timber framing company, and this is what we're going to do forever. And, we never thought we'd be making beer. Until we kind of had a couple down cycles in our business. It's so specialized what we were doing. And then there was the great, the economic recession of 2008 was particularly difficult. And that was kind of like, okay, well, do we, how many of these down cycles do we want to go through with construction? It's not very fun. And we started thinking back to when we were living in England and Scotland, and how much we absolutely loved the beer in the UK. Drinking real ales, at the local pubs. We got into pub culture over in the UK, where they're using a beer engine, and they're pumping, what we would call flat beer. And it's a 3.2% ale that's just, unbelievable flavors coming out of it, and esters, and, malty, wonderful, traditional real ales. So I don't know, we originally thought about whiskey, because we after the second downturn with our carpentry business, we just thought, we were kind of more or as much into whiskey at that time. And we visited so many distilleries when we lived in Scotland. It was kind of one of our things, and some breweries too. And we just thought, well, let's start a distillery. But it was, I mean, it's madness opening a distillery, especially like in 12, 13 years ago. It was just like, how do you do this? This is insane. You're not going to have any product to sell. You're going to have to make gin and vodka, et cetera, et cetera. So we said, well, we don't even know what we're doing here. And then we somehow pivoted to beer. I can't remember quite the moment, but we were like, well, we can just get some pops and try home brewing. And we literally, did the whole 5-gallon Coleman cooler mash tun, built out of like, kerf cut copper pipes, and a hand crank, mill. And we didn't do extract, because we liked the craft element, and we'd seen and been to these breweries where they were mixing in the grains. We went straight to all grain, and we tried it, and we did an English real ale as our first batch of beer. And it was just dumb luck. It just worked. It was just absolutely delicious. It was that giddy moment you have when you try something new with your hands, and it actually works, and you're pleased with the end result. It's like, you just get completely swept up in it. And it was basically like from that first batch, it was like, oh, we're going commercial. It's like, we're doing this. And it's like, we knew absolutely nothing. It's that, that blind, wonderful ignorance you have sometimes when you're charging towards a cliff. Yep. And you just don't know you're charging towards a cliff. So that's kind of where we were at. But we took inspiration from, because we said, well, what right do we have to start a brewery in Rigaud? Like this is crazy, isn't it? Like this is nuts. And we took inspiration from a couple breweries. There was Pit Caribou, and they're way out in the Gas Bay. They're like a 12-hour drive from us. We're like, well, they started a brewery in 2006, and they're still here, and they're doing great things. And there was BAOS just down the road from us, who started in, I think, the same year, and they were doing, you know, incredibly well, expanding at, you know, a huge rate of knots. And we just said, listen, these guys are opening breweries in rural settings, and, you know, pretty far from urban centers, and, you know, maybe we can too. So we kind of went into hyperdrive with the, you know, home brewing, lots of home brewing, and then we were going to start as a nano. I was really into nano breweries back in like 2009, 2010. I followed a bunch of their blogs in the US. You know, working on 2-barrel systems, 3-barrel systems, so, you know, 200 to 300 liters. And that's how we were going to start. We were gonna have it in this like 500, 600 square foot part of our workshop, and we were just going to supply Vaudreuil Soulange with beer, and that was it. That was really our ambition, was to supply Vaudreuil Soulange with beer, which is our county, our local county, and keep timber framing. Like 80% of the workspace would still be dedicated to carpenters, and the brewery would just help pay the rent, and, you know, we'd have fun doing it, and that was it. That was all. That was our ambition. We had no other ambition than that. At the last minute, we started looking at numbers, saying, "Oh my God, nano breweries! How are we going to do this? Like, this isn't going to work. We can't make enough beer." And we upped our budget at the last second and bought a 1,200 liter system, a 10-barrel system, and that's what we started with. But we still started with like a ridiculously low amount of cellar. We had 2 12 hectoliter fermenters, which is commercial suicide. Like, there's no way you can be profitable with that when you're distributing 100% of your beer, which is what we were doing from day one. We were open on Saturdays for the first, you know, year or two, but our product was, you know, 98% through distribution. So we were, man, we didn't know anything, and we went commercial not knowing a lot, clearly, with 2 12 hectoliter fermenters. So we had to. That's how we started, just on a wing and a prayer, and in a really small space, and we went from there, and then, you know, one thing led to another. I think people were puzzled by us. I remember reading some articles like, who are these people? Like, because no one knew us. We weren't known to home brewers. We weren't known to anyone in the industry. Often it's like known home brewers that are starting breweries, or people that have been in the industry and have industry experience. Those are the recommended ways to start breweries. We didn't follow, you know, those traditional routes. People were just kind of baffled by us. We're like, these 2 carpenters are brewing, and we've never heard of them, and they have this, you know, this place out in the backwoods in Rigaud. So that was how we started. We started in 2012, and we still had our carpenters were working, and the brewery was being supported by the timber framing business. The timber framing business was paying for our building. It was paying any salaries at the brewery. It was the mothership. And we kind of knew, we're like, well, we're commercially not viable at the size we're at. So the question is now, can we get to a size that's commercially viable before the bottom falls out? Because the timber frame business was prone to huge cycles, ups and downs. If we hit a down cycle with the timber frame business, and it's the mothership, the whole thing could go down, both businesses. So that was our concern, was, can we get the brewery on its own 2 feet before that happens? And we almost made it. We got about a year and a half in, and then we did get that inevitable downturn with the mothership construction business. And then, you know, Murray and I had to ante up and, you know, remortgage houses and things like that. But I mean, that's kind of all part of the deal when you're running a business. You know, luckily we were able to just kind of scrape our way through, and make it through that period to a point where the brewery became kind of viable after 2 years. We had invested every penny coming into the brewery in those early years on tanks, on expanding our fermentation capacity, on buying a better, bottling machine, on, reaching more customers and stores. So eventually the brewery did stand on its own 2 feet. And then, from the release of, let's say, the Yakima IPA, our West Coast IPA in 2013 onwards, it was kind of a whirlwind from that point on. The Yakima, I mean, without being melodramatic, the Yakima is responsible for keeping the brewery afloat and also where the brewery is at today, to this very day. To the point where in 2015, we'd had enough of construction, and we were so focused on the brewery. It's where all of our interest and opportunities lay. The construction was a chapter that we were winding down, and in 2015 we shut it down, and the whole building was already actually being used by the brewery by that point. The poor carpenters got chucked into the parking lot for one summer, and then we had to rent another building for them to work in for that winter, and then the next summer, at the end of it, was more or less over. So we had this crossover period of about 3 years where we were doing both businesses, and then we shut down the carpentry side. So yeah, I don't know when you guys became aware of us. Like, at what point we came onto your radar?
Well, I got into beer in 2000, or heavy into beer in around 2010, 2011. So I remember when you guys opened, and you had, I think if I'm not mistaken, your first 2 beers was an oatmeal stout, and was it like a blonde ale?
Yeah, just a pale ale, blonde. Yeah,
or pale ale,
kind of a little dry hopped American pale ale. Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, back then, even like anytime someone new opened, it was kind of exciting because it was also so new to me at the time as well, only being like into it for like a year or so at that point. But to your point of what you mentioned earlier, I mean, Yakima, I think it was probably it was perfect timing for you because at the time, from what I recall, like IPAs were really blowing up in the States, had been for some time, and even like in Ontario, I think they had some solid examples. But we were lacking, and we were just getting to the point, I think, where there were a few West Coast style IPAs. Because I think before that it was more, I don't know if we'd call them English IPAs, but they weren't quite as aromatic. They weren't quite as fruity. I think they were trying to aim towards that, but they weren't. They weren't hitting the mark like they were in the States. And I remember like getting beers from the States was such an exciting thing because no one was doing the IPAs like they were. And I remember like Benelux put out Sabotage in bottles, and that was pretty close. And I remember that blew my mind. And there were a couple of others, but Yakima was the one, I think. I mean, not to toot your home, but I think it was just the best of the bunch by far. And not only that, it wasn't some limited run, right? Because that was still, even though back then that was a less of a thing as like it is now, where it's just like something new every week. The IPAs that were coming out that were great were few and far between, and they weren't things that were on the shelves all the time. And Yakima was, and so I think that's why it was so huge for the Quebec industry.
Yeah, that's a good point. I moved to Canada in 2010. I moved here in 2012. I was in Toronto before that. So I got into beer in 2011, early, doing the stupid selfie thing as just like something to do my friends in Australia were doing. I was like, yeah, sure. You have to drink 365 beers in a year. And I was like, well, obviously there's not 365 beers that exist, so let's do it. Obviously that just kept going. And I was drinking beers in Australia, but not so much. So when I came to Montreal, it was an interesting thing. Because I guess, Noah, you were sort of just before me. I imagine I was drinking beer, but not documenting it. And I was coming here not knowing French, and then coming into like a depth, and then it was just all of these French words. I'm like, I don't remember any of these. I'll never remember a name of the beer. It was really difficult. And I remember when, I don't know if I just saw Yakima and thought it was cool because I was getting into IPAs heavy at the time or whatever, but I remember it was the first time I ever did a trade. There was some dude I met on the internet in Edmonton or something like that. So I traded him Yakima and the Pit Caribou American IPA, and it blew his fucking mind because it blew my mind initially. And it was one of the ones that was like, oh, wow, because I didn't know much about Quebec beer. It was hard coming here fresh and not knowing what was happening. And then when you saw that, and then from then on, I always sort of, every time I saw Le Castor, I usually just picked a few brands and just kind of ran through them. And just whatever I saw of your stuff, I would just grab that because I was like, well, Le Castor, Yakima was amazing. So I think there's a lot of people, and Guillaume is saying here, silk screen bottles, which obviously was, the bottles were super cool at the time.
That's right. I mean, we fully acknowledge that timing is everything, and we were inspired by what was going on in the U.S. So we wanted to release an IPA when we launched the brewery, but we knew that we had a lot to learn, and we wanted to kind of get going with the brewery and have a bit more brewing experience before tackling it, because we figured it was going to be a bit of a challenge to get an IPA where we wanted it. So we started in summer 2012, and we released Yakima in like March or spring of 2013. And like you say, at the time there were there were no West Coast IPAs that I know of that were being fully distributed across Quebec. Now some of the brew pubs were doing them. Like you said, Benelux was fantastic at West Coast IPA before almost everybody. But I don't know how much they were distributing them at that time. So I know that Pit Caribou released their American IPA the week before us. I think we had both, ended up launching our American style West Coast IPAs and screen printed bombers like within a week of each other. It was pretty.
And they were always
pretty
put
funny
together on the shelf. They're the same size. So it was like, whoa, we get one of each. Like, why not? Yeah.
That absolutely, and it was definitely, we were hugely influenced by the United States, as we all still are. The Stone Brewing and Rogue, the screen printed bottles. The screen printed bottles were very useful for us for two main reasons. One, obviously, is they look pretty sharp. There weren't many screen printed bottles on the Quebec market at that time. And, we came out of the gates with a pretty polished looking beer. And I think that was a really good thing. But we were seeing Stone and Rogue and all these other guys doing it, saying that looks like that's how we have to stand out. We gotta have a different bottle, a different size bottle, and screen printing. Because we felt there was so many beers on the market in 2012, and now look where we're at. But back then we're like, we can't have the same bottle as everyone. We can't have a paper label. We're just going to blend right into everything else. And we're nobodies. Nobody knows who we are. So we want people to. That's why our logo is so big on those old bottles.
Yeah,
all our old brands. Front. So the whole front is the logo, and that was deliberate. So the Yakima, the Pale Ale, the Stout. The Eclipse Black IPA, they're giant logos, right? And that's because we wanted people to identify the brewery from like 20, 30 feet away in a store and say, oh, look, there's Castor over there. Because what I was finding in 2012 was you pick up a bottle of some of the beers, and even after looking at it this close and turning it around, I still didn't know who brewed the beer. I couldn't figure it out. Because it was just this tiny little mention of the brewery on the back of the label. And I thought, well, no, we can't do that. We, like I said, we're nobodies. Nobody knows us. We have to get the idea of Le Castor in people's heads. So all those first beers that came out were just massive logos. And now our beers, all the label designs, the logo is a tiny element in the sky, usually a sun or a moon or something, right?
Literally in the sky.
So that's it. We were hugely influenced by those guys, Stone, and also a book that Mitch Steele had just written at that time, because the East Coast West Coast thing was real, and like not New England but East Coast West Coast, right? So the East Coast is like the remnants of the British IPA, and people on the eastern seaboard, I guess Quebec included, had a really hard time losing the crystal malt from their IPAs. And Sam Calagione from Dogfish Head, I was like, devouring his books. He was such a great ambassador for beer. still is, but
Mhm.
but back then, the dude, it was all about Dogfish Head back then, and he was, his rap battles with East Coast IPA and talking trash to the West Coast guys. So, there was a pride in East Coast IPA. It's more balanced, it's more malty, all this kind of stuff. You need the malt to balance the hops and the bitterness. And the West Coast guys looking at them going, and they're just like, screw that. Like, we're not even going to use crystal malt, and we're going to put tons of hops in it. And, looking at this IPA from the West Coast, Stone, at the time, it was like so pale compared to what we were used to on the East Coast. And it's just like, this is inspiring stuff. Like, this is where we got to go. And Mitch Steele released his book at that time. And in the book, he's just his mantra going on and on, lose the crystal malt, lose the crystal malt. And it was such a, it sounds silly now, but it was such a revolutionary idea at that time to lose the crystal malt. You're like, but can we make an IPA without crystal malt? It was like so shocking. I mean, yeah, it's silly, isn't it? Right. But that's the truth. So to come out, with a pale, really pale looking IPA that wasn't crushingly bitter. Like, Yakima has never, ever been about the IBUs. We quickly took that off the bottle because even back then in 2013, the whole IBU debate and question was like, this is silly. This number is causing more problems and more confusion than anything. Let's just remove the number. So we took it off the bottle after whatever, a year or so. The idea was never to be crushingly bitter. We never bought into the IBU race and having 1,000 IBUs in a beer. We wanted drinkability. It's always flavor, aroma, bitterness, malt. Just try and balance everything. And that's what the Yakima has always been. There's definitely, we went out that, in 2016 to California and had some of the West Coast IPAs, and it was like, oh shit, these things are bitter. Like, because we hadn't had them in a few years. And it's like, yeah, the Yakima kind of drifted. We also were influenced by Heady Topper back in the day, back in like 2013.
Right.
People would bring us up some Heady Topper. And again, back in the day, New England style IPA didn't really exist. It was kind of Vermont style IPA. And we almost saw more, we felt like we had almost more in common with that than some of the super bitter, aggressively, high IBU West Coast IPAs. So Yakima has always been kind of, we feel like a middle ground, but using Cali Ale yeast, sort of clean, neutral yeast, and classic, C hops, things like Citra, Cascade, Simcoe, Centennial, etc. So we were really lucky to put that beer out when we did, and as a result, and we distributed it as well as we could, and it, we're lucky enough that it's become kind of one of the standards, I guess, in Quebec, and it's kind of what our brewery is still really, really known for is that beer, even all these years later.
I love it. That's cool to get that story, man. Yeah, it's.
You want to hit the next one, Craig?
I was about to say, yeah. I'm looking at the time there. Speaking of IPAs, and we were just talking about the IPA that put you guys on the map here in Quebec and has continued to do so. And now, when I remember, I was telling Tiff, my partner today, I remember the first time I had this. I think I told you, Dan, when we spoke a couple months ago. I was with my friend he's from Toronto, but he lives in San Diego now, and he came to visit, and we went to Vice Versa, and they had. Back then in 2018, nowhere had New England IPAs here. I used to get so fucking mad about drinking beer in Montreal. It pissed me off because I could never get what I want. Now, Quebec, in my opinion, is the greatest beer province in Canada. And they had a Le Castor New England IPA. And I was like, what? You do it? And I remember trying, and I think I told you it was like the early batches. Like, I'm talking like it was a test batch. It was a
test batch.
Yes. Yeah. So I was super impressed. And if I'm honest, I don't recall if I've even had it in a can yet. So I'm going to go grab it. Do you want to maybe tell us about this one and how you guys doing it?
Did I send?
Yeah, I have.
That was one of the ones I sent?
Yep, we had the New England, then there's a double IPA after this. So do you want to hold up the can, Noah?
I mean...
I'll be back in 2 seconds.
Right on. Yeah, so New England IPA, where do you start, eh? It's I mean, when did you
Yeah.
become when did you become aware of New England style IPA as its own distinct style, Noah? Like when did it come to your attention?
I think for me, I had like a moment when it hit me almost like before it became a real big thing. My buddy went to Trillium and brought me back 2 bottles back when they used to bottle. And at the time before that, it was there wasn't like you were saying before, there wasn't really a name for it. Like it was Vermont IPAs or maybe juicy IPAs or I even heard the term white IPAs and stuff. And like it was kind of like
Oh, yeah.
the heady topper, but getting even more aromatic. But then once I had those Trilliums, I had never tasted anything like that.
Mm.
It was just like a whole new world for me. Um, and then it was like, okay, I need to seek out what's going on here with this. And weren't many people doing it
What
at
is
the
this
time.
sorcery? Yeah.
Yeah, it was and it was like it was an intensity that I wasn't used to because you're used to almost like a bitter intensity or an aromatic intensity, but this was like tasting like hop burn for the first time almost. It was I
Yeah.
mean, compared to, I'm sure it wasn't that bad compared to what we have these days, but I'd never experienced anything like that. So that was the experience for me. And then it just kind of, other half coming into play and obviously all the other big guys. And then hitting Quebec eventually. And Nord-Est
Yeah.
kind of
What
really,
a
from Boreal really kind of brought it in, I think.
Well, that's right. And Nord-Est, the Boreal is, I mean, their New England IPA is excellent. Um, but I believe they were the first widely distributed one across Quebec. So they're
Yeah.
gonna forever be the benchmark for that reason, right?
Yep.
They're the go-to and they're widely distributed. The beer is excellent. Um, getting in early, as we said, it definitely is a really nice luxury to have. We got caught. Um, well, it took us forever to get a New England IPA to market because we just weren't happy with the results.
Right.
Um,
I had
we
heard that.
It took years and years. So 2016, I guess, is when it really kind of came onto my radar.
Yeah.
Um,
Sounds about right.
I can remember having Jutsu from Bellwoods when we were looking at brew houses in Toronto. I was like, this is just like fruit juice. This is insane. What is this? Why does it look so terrible? I had that same initial reaction. And on our trip to California in 2016, we visited a brewery that had just been open for, I think, only a year, called Monkish.
Ooh.
And
Hmm.
I didn't know who they were, but the people at Premier Stainless, our brew house manufacturer, said, "Oh, go visit them. Henry's a nice guy," and he was super nice. We knocked on the door on the back, and he let us in, took us on a tour, and let us taste a bunch of double New England IPA and some of his wild beers, and it's just like, okay, this is crazy. What are we drinking here? This is nuts. And then we went to another brewery, Casa Agria, a smaller one on the coast. And I can just remember like just constantly looking down at my glass and it was empty all the time. And I just kept kind of handing it back to the server like I'd done something wrong. I was just like, this is not normal. What is happening? This is it's like so fruity, so good to drink. There was none of the hop burn. These beers were just like whoosh, just
Yeah.
unbelievable soft finish. And I was just like rattled. I was just like, what is going on? Because, I was really, personally, I was a bit, late to the party for sure. But 2016 is when, as a brewery, we're like, okay, we got to get on this. It's like, I don't know if you've heard, there's this thing called New England IPA. So, we started test batching and it didn't go well. It really didn't go well. So you might have tasted like a keg test batch. So we do like a
It
10
was.
hectoliter batch or something.
Yep.
and then like run off some kegs and dump the rest, and just try vice versa. And some other keg customers, we try out the beer and see what people say. And we went around in circles, man. We even went so far as to brew our normal commercial size batches, which are, in theory 50 hex, but by the time you add the hops, we get 32 hex out of it.
Really? Oh my
and
God.
and we just like dumped. I don't know how many commercial size batches we dumped, but it was dozens and dozens.
Oh wow.
Just hundreds of hectoliters of New England IPA down the drain, 2016, 2017, 2018. And then finally, was it 2019? Yeah, summer 2019, we put out the one you're drinking now,
Okay.
with the very, very creative name. And yeah, I mean, it was insane. I mean, we had all the problems you can imagine. But eventually, like after a year or two, the beers were good. We had 2 out of 3 components were kind of acceptable. So the aromas, the flavors, but the finish, we couldn't get the finish right. We're like, why is it awful? Why is it so astringent? Why is it burning? What is going on? We tried dozens of yeast strains. We tried dozens of hop combos. There's 62 different ways you can make a New England IPA. And if you read people talk about their methodology, it has to be this way. We've tried it every single way. We lost a year and a half with hop creep, not understanding what it was. Hop creep is only a term, like it's been around. They've actually talked about it for a long time, decades and decades, hop creep. But as kind of something that's in the consciousness of the industry, it's fairly new since New England IPA came around. And hop creep caught us out for, like I said, a year and a half. We didn't know how to control it. We're like, the beer won't stop fermenting. Is it an infection?
So
What's going on here?
What is hop creep exactly?
Well, hop creep is basically because you're adding, so a New England IPA has about double the amount of dry hops that our Yakima has. Although the Yakima, it's interesting. We have, I think, double the dry hops in the Yakima that we did when the beer first came out. And it's not considered a hugely in-your-face, punchy, hoppy beer, but there's about double the dry hops than we have from the original batches. New England IPA takes that to another level. It's roughly double, again, the Yakima. So basically, you're putting so much hop material in the beer, and the hops actually have enzymes in them that will trigger basically like a diastatic reaction. So they'll start cutting up, starches. The fermentation's finished, but there's so much hop matter in the beer now, assuming it's at a warmer temperature. It starts to actually produce simple sugars, and the yeast wake up and say, "Oh, thanks for that," and they get back to work and they start fermenting those simple sugars. And you don't have this problem with less hop matter, and you don't have it at lower temperatures. So one of the problems we had is, the early go-to methods that were discussed, and even still to this day, was this whole biotransformation thing where you're adding hops to a live fermentation. So you pitch your yeast into your wort, which is cool to whatever 20 degrees Celsius. It starts to ferment. And then everyone's saying you got to add hops during ferment to get the biotransformation, which is, the yeast interact with the hop compounds and create new fruity aromatics, which are not possible without this biotransformation. And it's an essential part of producing New England IPA, right? So we were like, okay, well, we don't know anything, so that's what we have to do. So, we did that. But the problem with that is now you've got hops kind of in an active fermentation. And if you then keep it, at that temperature to finish the rest of your dry hops, now you've got a lot of hop matter in there, and you've now got enough enzymes in to actually start to change things and to produce simple sugars and to kickstart fermentation. So we're starting to see blow off activity, and like the beer has started to ferment again. And so it would ferment right down like a saison yeast. We get into the ones, 1 Plato. So let's say the beer was at 4, let's say, after a ferment, and normally with this amount of hops, it was it was a runaway fermentation, and we didn't know what the hell was going on. We lost so much time, and you know, since that time, there's been papers published on hop creep. It's much better understood because people didn't think there was enough enzymes present to be able to do this. So in fact, it is. So we've completely changed the way we make New England IPA, and it was from meeting people like Monkish who were like, no, I don't do any of that. You know, we semi-crash our beer and we dry hop at semi-crash, which is what we've always done for Yakima because it facilitates yeast harvesting as well. Anyway, so we went back to kind of the way we normally dry hop our beers, and that solved the problem. So anyway, long story short, we had every problem
basically.
Yeah, every problem you can imagine, to the point where we're like, well, it's not the grain, it's not the yeast, it's not the hops. What's left, right? Duh, the water. So we're like, but our water's been fine. We've been making beer. Like, our water's weird. Like, we get it out of a well on our property, and it's weird. It's always been weird. It's got a couple parameters that are kind of very high, not good. But we've been making beer with it, you know, for 8-9 years. Well, at the time it was whatever it was, 5 or 6 years. So we never really thought to look at our water. And in the end, the water was the problem for New England IPA, because you're pushing the limits. You're adding so much vegetal hop matter to the beer that water becomes absolutely critical. And I'm not just talking about, you know, your chloride and your sulfate levels and things like that. You know, which is, and again, part of the whole debate of what you should do to make New England IPA. Our water was pretty bad, apparently. So we had to invest in a reverse osmosis system. So we're basically stripping down the water to nothing. There's nothing left. And then building it back up in the brew house. And literally from batch 1 with the new water, it was like, ta-da, it kind of worked, right? The beer was, we got what we needed. We got what we were trying to get all along. And it was like, wow, that was painful. That was 3 years of torture. So that's why we were so late to the party, you know, for 2016, 2017, 2018. And we're kind of on the outside looking in going, man, that New England IPA party looks pretty fun. Wish we could be part of that. And you know, how about a Yakima in a bomber, anyone? And the market's basically doing this, saying, you know what you can do with your Yakima and a bomber? They didn't say that. They still bought it. But that's what it felt like, because we started to feel, you know, we started to feel really irrelevant. It's just the way it is, right? It's the way it goes. There's ebbs and flows to your place, your position in the marketplace. And it's like, we're trying over here. We're really trying. We know we need to be in cans. We knew in 2015 we wanted to be in cans. When we launched the brewery, we wanted to be in cans. We were looking at Oscar Blues in the US. We said, we got to be in cans. Could we afford a canning machine? No, it wasn't an option. So we went to the biggest possible bottle we could find, which worked for a few years. But we knew bottles were dead in 2015, but we wanted to jump up to a really good canning machine. And that would require an entire new building to be added to the brewery, which was a 2-year, 3-year project. So we're like, it's just too big. So we kind of struggled on for 3 years with our now irrelevant, out of date large bottle and our West Coast IPA, which some days was feeling less relevant, and all the new kids are having all this fun with their cans and their New England IPA. So you know, it's good though. It's good though to be humbled. It's good for the soul, and you know, but it was also a chance to kind of get ourselves back in what we call the game. And once we finally made the switch to cans, which was a monumental project for us, and then the New England IPAs followed on pretty quickly from that. It was really interesting seeing the market's response. There was a whole new subset of beer drinkers that didn't know who Le Castor was, which was hilarious to us, because like, but we're only like 7 years old. How can you not know who? But it's because they'd only been drinking beer in cans, and really only their preference was really only for New England style IPA. So they had no idea that we existed. So it was kind of fun seeing these new people come to our beers, and also other old people that not old people, but consumers that used to drink our beer come
Those
back to the
geezers.
brand because now it's in a can, and they're like, yeah, Yakima's in a can. This is such a great thing. So so that was a really fun year for us, 2019, to see those two things happen in the same year.
It's funny though, and this could just be a personal experience with this. Maybe people don't agree or not. I don't know. But as much as you were saying you were late to the party, you also kind of dropped your new IPAs in a like right before you could walk into depths and get relatively decent New England IPAs all the time. And what I mean by that is like, you know, before that I was like, okay, do I have to drive out to Missouri, or do I have to somehow get Buck Canada or what, or all these other guys that, you know, tend to do the stuff that everyone wants or whatever. Because you couldn't walk into your local dep and necessarily just have one on the shelf. But when you dropped the New England and then the Aussie one, and then a double, and then another double, so I think you had 4 on the market for a while, and that's grown even from then.
Exactly.
It was awesome for me because I was like, oh, finally I can just go to Le Goblet pretty much any time and get a fresh, really solid New England. So as much as you were late to the party, it also felt like full circle with Yakima in that
distribution wise.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's true actually, because maybe 2 years ago, in terms of, you know, how many were widely distributed, there's definitely a few good ones, and there's more now. But yeah, I guess you're right. A lot of it was coming out of smaller, newer breweries who were choosing and able to sell the vast majority of their beers out their door, and why wouldn't they, right? So
exactly.
And it worked well, and it like it was super exciting for us, adding, you know, the second one, the Australian one, and then the double, well, the Metamorph, the double IPA was second, and it worked well, and we had a super busy 2020. But we noticed, like, at the end of summer last year, it was just like, you could see it in the sales. It's like they were wanting something new from us. And again, it was, our mindset was like, but we have 4 New England IPAs, like, isn't that enough? And the market's just like, no, dumbass, it's not enough. You need to make more, and different ones, and lots of them. So in the fall, you know, that led to the Progression series. We're like, oh, I see. Okay, so it's like we have different breweries within the brewery. It's like there's the brewery that produces the Yakima, the Session IPA, which was pretty revolutionary in its day, I have to say. I sound like someone
that
talking
Session
about the
was
old days here.
amazing.
But you remember when there were no Session IPAs on the market? You know, I do. It's like, and that beer was really hard. That beer was really hard to brew. I remember we scrapped 4 batches of that before we put one out. Again, in the balance of having a low alcohol beer with a higher amount of hops is a really tricky thing to do. So that beer for us was like, that was a big accomplishment back in the day. And it's still in our lineup. I was bummed that I couldn't get the haiku to you guys. I wanted you guys to try that one, which takes the Session IPA concept to the extreme. It's not a session beer per se. It's 5.5%, but it's a New England pale ale, and the challenges are identical. It's like, okay, we have less alcohol to fall back on here. We want to put an irresponsible amount of hops in the beer. How do we do this and maintain drinkability and make sure that it resembles something that's nice to drink? So anyway, we'll get you that one next time.
Sure.
But yeah, so yeah, it's really nuts. So you have core brands that get offered to everybody, about 8, and now this beer here, New England IPA, is now a core brand. It took us took us a year and a half to make that decision, because again, it's, you know, but like the Yakima, when it came out, we were bottling it. We were just bottling for what we needed to get on the truck. Like we were hyper obsessed with freshness, because we knew the beer was stored warm in a lot of the stores.
Oh yeah.
So it's a terrible thing, a hoppy beer in a warm store.
Yeah.
So we're just, we said in the beginning, NEIPAs will never be core brands. We just don't want to do that. We don't want them sitting there dying on shelves. But eventually, you know, it has to be done. You have to offer it to more and more customers because they're asking for it.
Yeah.
I know Boreal, I think in the beginning they had, you know, a big list of requirements for you to become a distributor of their New England IPA, you know, and refrigeration was one of those requirements. But at a certain point, you know, it's with all the other New England IPA in the market, you know, people are asking for it, you know, you don't have maybe the leverage you would want. So the New England IPA is now a core beer. So it'll get offered to most of our customers, and Yakima and Pilsner and all these beers, stout, get offered to everyone. And then the progression series and the smaller batch beers, the specialty beers, get offered to a smaller and smaller list of customers, even though those customers are spread out all around geographically. The more specialty depanneurs, the specialty retailers, people like that. So. Yeah, different distribution for different customers, definitely.
It's funny. We talked about the Boreal being one of the first, but I think what I forgot about until now is the I think for me, Les Trois Mousquetaires IPA, the one that Alex built, was one of the first that had pretty good distribution, that was really kind of was essentially a New England. I remember he was really proud of that beer, and that was a really solid beer too.
I remember when I first tried that, I was looking to do.
Yeah.
We just started doing our YouTube, and we did a YouTube series called Versus, where we're just comparing beers. And I had some stuff, and I asked Noah, like, I think we kind of hadn't known each other too long. I was like, yo, what's a New England I can get here in Quebec? Because I had Sawdust City's juicing at the time. And you were like, get Les Trois Mousquetaires IPA. Well, oh, okay. So I went and got it warm off a shelf from this place I do not patronize anymore in my area. And when I poured it, I was like, this is not what it is. And then Noah, and it was like 3-4 weeks old. And that beer was when I learned you're not supposed to keep, you know, hazy beers on the shelf warm, and you're supposed to drink them fresh. Because I feel like, even though you were saying about Yakima needing to be kept refrigerated, I don't think it was a known thing, because I was really big into West Coast IPAs, like just like any of us, but it wasn't something that was discussed, and I didn't even know. I didn't even think twice. And then when I bought that beer and did this video, I'm like, this is not what Noah said. What's he on about? And then when you told me, like, dude, you know, treat it like milk, I'm like, oh, okay, like this is this whole new concept. So I think it's definitely something that was that came about a little bit more over time, as far as, you know.
Yeah, I think it was always like, I think IPAs were always known to not be cellarable beer. Like, you need to drink them fresh. Freshness was key, but it didn't become. It wasn't quite a thing until the New England really hit, where beers are turning brown and aromatics are just falling apart.
Yeah.
Because I think there was still a malt base that you could rely on for New England's. For older style IPAs. You had a bitterness in there. I mean, they could get pretty cardboardy if you're sitting on them for 6 months, but it wasn't quite as. I'm not gonna say it wasn't quite as important, but it wasn't quite as detrimental and risky as it is now.
It wasn't discussed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
not
that's
quite
it.
as
It
much.
wasn't. No. That was the thing. I mean, when you're a distributing brewery, you know, the amount of trouble we go to and care we take trying to mitigate oxygen ingress into the beer, it's ridiculous. And that's one of the reasons we waited on buying a canning machine, because we wanted to jump up in quality. We wanted to really kind of invest above our weight class in the machinery, because everything we do is hoppy pretty much. and we didn't want to kind of stick with the quality machine that we had for our bombers, for our bottles. So you go through all this trouble. I mean, keeping O2 out of the fermenter when you're dry hopping, keeping O2 out of the transfers to the bright tanks, purging bright tanks. And then you're like, whew, got it into the bright tank. The oxygen levels are looking good. Now you have to put it in a can. And, you spend, millions of dollars potentially on canning lines. And then you get into the can and it's like, okay, the TPO, the oxygen levels are good in the can. Here we go. Put it in the cold room. All right. It's still good. Here we go. Goes on a truck and just kiss that sucker goodbye. It goes on a truck and you just cry. You just stand there weeping because you know that it's out of your hands now, and it's up to the distribution network how that beer is treated. And a lot of the good dépanneurs are refrigerating NEIPAs, and we thank them for that. And even the bigger stores, a lot of them are refrigerating the beer. But there's a huge percentage of both dépanneurs and bigger stores that don't, and there's nothing you can do about it. We're not a big industrial brewery. We can't go in and buy fridges for everyone. So it's really out of our hands, and we've done everything we can to put that beer into the marketplace with low oxygen levels. But whatever happens will happen, and unfortunately, sometimes if it sits there a while, or there was a problem with an individual can, whatever, it's going to oxidize. And these New England style IPAs are the most hopped, the most sensitive to oxygen of any beer style ever known to man. So it's a real challenge for a brewery that distributes like us. This is what's great about these other brewers that are, well, look at Treehouse as the epitome of, one of the, I guess, creators of the style. Like, I don't know what their brewing capacity is on a yearly basis, but it's something unbelievable. I mean, it was 50,000 barrels not long ago. It's probably double that by now. And they're a regional sized brewery now, and they're selling 100% of it out their door. We can't all be Treehouse Brewing, sadly. We have to distribute through a network. But they have complete control over their product, and that is the absolute dream when you're making New England IPA, is that you're handing that cold beer right into the hands of the consumer, and then you tell them, remember to refrigerate it, and then you can go to bed at night, fairly confident that beer will taste good when they decide to drink it. But when you send it out into the distribution network, it's just like, whoop, you just can't control it. So it's great. Yeah, that's it. The market, the beer styles are going towards more and more fragile.
Look at smoothies, right?
Wow, that's next level.
Well, that's a whole other conversation for sure. And that's why you don't see, like, we don't feel like we can make obvious, smoothie beers, or even the dessert stouts,
pastries and stuff.
Sweet stouts, pastry stouts, sorry. Because I'm just trying to imagine what it'll be like if it sits on a shelf for 2 months, what that beer is going to be like.
Yeah. And
it's not a good image in my brain. So it's like, we'll leave those beer styles to other people. And again, those beer styles are mostly being handed to the customer cold. And again, when they can be, and the customer is on board and is educated, it's great. It's fantastic. But that communication is going to break down for sure in a distribution network. So, it's interesting because it's, the good dépanneurs have done so much pioneering work in terms of just making Quebec beer available. They're the first people when you start a brewery. It's the specialized retailers. They jump onto your brewery and they're like, we want your beer now. And they're really the ones leading the charge. They're the ones that have helped create this market that we have, and you see the bigger chain stores jumping on board because of that. They're acting in the most ideal way possible as a partner. They're a curator, a caretaker of the beer right to when it's handed to the customer, and that that's kind of a unfortunately foreign concept, I guess, to to us in North America sometimes. You know, food in supermarkets doesn't need that level of babysitting, except for fresh produce. It's like supermarkets, they take care of the fresh produce, right? They're looking after it. They're making sure it's not rotting and bruised, etc. But the beer, it's in a can that lasts forever, right? It's like a tin of Spam. It's like, no, it's not Spam. It's freaking beer, and you need to look after it. But it looks like it's a non-perishable, but it's a perishable.
Yes,
And
exactly.
we just, it takes decades to get over that mental hurdle. You know, look at the UK when you serve real ale. The innkeeper, the pub owner, is a big part of that. The end part of the process of delivering that beer to the consumer, their knowledge in how to tap a cask of real ale and serve it at what temperature, and you know how much time they need to leave it. All these things play a huge role in the experience that the patron in the pub has, and they accept that responsibility. They're like, without question. And oftentimes you get a bad pint, and you know the Brits are educated enough to say, well, they're not necessarily going to blame the brewery. They're going to say, well, the pub owner doesn't know what the hell they're doing. You know, they didn't prepare the cask in the correct manner, because that is their job. So whereas here, you know, if we get a complaint about an oxidized beer, it's our bad. It's, you go straight to the brewery. It's there's no like, hey Mr. Store Owner, do you think maybe you could put these beers somewhere cold? Like, you're part of this distribution chain, and it would be really great if you could be on board with that concept. But that, we're not there yet totally. We are in parts, like I said, the dépanneurs and some of the more forward thinking bigger stores. They come straight to the brewery, and we accept it, and we take care of them. And it's just like, it's our beer. If it's oxidized, if it happens, we'll replace it. And that's just the reality we have to kind of live with.
Yeah, it's
super interesting. And I am seeing more and more that depths and stuff are doing refrigeration, which is good. I think we're getting pretty close, but I don't think we'd be doing Le Castor a good service here if we didn't touch on your wild beer spectrum, because it's massive, and your use of Brett in all kinds of ways. You've gone from creating wild saisons on the tart side, on the non-tart side, to taking your Belgian triple Sanctuaire and then shifting that to a wild Brett version, which at the time was one of my favorites, to more experimental stuff where you're taking like stock ales and old English high ABV beers that were brewed traditionally wild a long time ago, to all kinds of really fun and experimental wild yeast infused beers. So I don't know if you could take a moment to talk about that, but maybe, I don't know, before that, Craig, did you want to do any comments or anything like that?
I can just quickly run through the last few comments. I mean, they're a little bit dated because I didn't want to interrupt. The conversation was so good, so I didn't want to jump in with these. I'll just read them out quick. Benoit said the New England is the bomb, so solid. It doesn't try to be anyone else's New England. It's Le Castor's New England IPA. Just well done, great taste, and mouthfeel, easily available. Did you say which hops are in this at all?
Thanks, Benoit. The New England IPA is predominantly El Dorado, Mosaic, Citra.
Citra, okay.
Yeah, fairly equal proportions.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Guillaume is saying, I know Le Castor is a bit of an introvert, but are there any collabs in the future? And I don't know what this means. It says, hello, 30 cents, Chevalier du Funk. I'm not sure if that's a...
Chevalier du Funk was Dunham, and 30 Cent was Pit Caribou. Some of the awesome early... I still have a Chevalier du Funk, I think, in my cellar.
Yeah, you should crack it open. We haven't done any collabs in a while. Those were fun. I mean, the one we did with Pit Caribou, we worked with Benoit, who now runs Oval Brewery in Val d'Espoir.
Val d'Espoir, yeah.
And that was fun because you remember when black IPAs were all the rage? You remember that?
I do. I remember when
Oh,
Eclipse
yeah.
dropped. Eclipse was like an event for me. I was so stoked on Eclipse
Yeah,
because
yeah,
when Black
that was
IPA was
fun.
the shit.
I mean, the collabs are fun. The collabs are fun when you can kind of, I like to think of them as kind of tackling a certain problem or challenge, and kind of sharing the burden of that with someone. We're not at Le Castor. We're not too much into just collab for collab's sake. And it is a wonderful marketing tool to use, and it's all good. People that want to do collabs. I know, there's some. I remember reading some breweries in the U.S. They're just like, we're going to take a break from collabs because they're literally doing one every week, and we're just so focused
Yeah.
on what we're doing. But those collabs you mentioned were fun because they were kind of, what can we do that's kind of different, and what problem or idea can we tackle together? And the one with Benoit, the 30 sous. So we took the beaver, which is 5 cents, and they're the caribou, which is 25 cents, and that's how Benoit came up with the name for the 30-cent black IPA. It was pretty good, and I like the logo and the design, the mashup we did, and we had to work through the problem of creating a black IPA, which wasn't obvious back then because it had way more dry hops than our Yakima IPA at the time. And now it's again, it's all relative. It's not an extreme amount of dry hops anymore, but back then it was. And we had to kind of balance that with the beer, and we didn't want astringents again. We don't like that astringents or hop burn in the finish, and that was really fun. So yeah, but we also, well, those beers will never see the light of day again, not from us anyway. We definitely would do something else moving forward, but we are known as pretty. We do keep to ourselves. We like our little quiet, regal lifestyle, and now with the pandemic as well, collabs are pretty difficult. But we did do an interesting collab with À la Feu that came out.
Oh, yeah.
For the L'année de la
and
Rouge.
it's yeah, that's it. So it feeds into the wild beer discussion. À la Feu was doing collabs, well, over the last couple of years, I think, with breweries that they selected, and they asked to do them with us, and I like the idea they had, which was to come to our cellar and taste, a bunch of barrels. So, we laid out a bunch of barrels, and they came and tasted through them, and they wanted to blend a beer of ours with their Rouge de Mekinac. I think it's like a kind of like a Flanders / Creek. It's like a hybrid, if I remember. And so they picked our Bière de Garde and one of our blending saisons, because we have saison barrels that doesn't have a name per se. It's just a blending beer, and they did. So we actually sent them the oak barrels. We put the oak barrels on a truck. We just said, take the barrels and keep them, because
Wow.
we're actually in the process of reducing our cellar. Again, wild beers and barrel aged beers, the market has gone down in for us. Maybe not for other people's beer, but for our beer. So we're in the process of reducing our barrel inventory from over 300 barrels to down to 100 or 120. Somewhere there. We're cutting it way down. So that's why I was like, take the beer in the barrels and keep them, or whatever, do what you want with them. So that was kind of a super fun concept that they came up with. And also it just happened to kind of blend in with the pandemic beautifully. It was a social distancing collab. And then they blended the beer out and they released it. And we got the opportunity to do one on our side. So I asked for 2 totally different beers because I kind of didn't want to put out something that was too similar to what they'd done. And I tasted their spontaneous beer, the Cuvée Western, which is just kind of blew me away. It's like it so reminds me of traditional gueuze, like holy cow, that's a really, really good beer. So we asked for that. And then they had also a mellower beer, which would be a nice blending component, like a grisette aged on plums that was much more subtle. So that would kind of temper the acidity nicely. And we blended that with our Piriform, which is our wild. It's a barrel-aged Saison, tart barrel-aged Saison aged on organic pears. And we blended those three together. And then out came the Pony Express. We called it the Pony Express. Put a it's our second label with a beaver riding a pony. The Chevalier
second.
It's our second, and I didn't really realize it till after it was done. I was like, oh man, we've done this before. There's a beaver riding a pony. The Chevalier de Funk label, which is I love that label. It's a beaver on top of, kind of looks like a donkey, but it's kind of a pony donkey. And anyway, this label was similar. Animals riding animals, whatever.
Let's go.
It was fun. So long story short, that was a really interesting collaboration. With a brewery we have a lot of respect for, and who is, with True to Diable, I guess, is the biggest barrel agers in not only Quebec, but I think the country. I don't know who would be bigger anywhere in Canada than the cellar that True to Diable manages, and À la Fou now has, I think, over 500 barrels. So that's huge. Yeah, that's impressive stuff, and respect. They've been around a long time, and their wild beer is some of the best stuff I've ever had. So again, I don't think they get enough credit for we don't hear enough about them for the level of the quality level that they put out. So that was fun.
I love it.
So yeah, I mean, in terms of wild beer, I mean, Cole's Notes, it's like True to Diable was a very early influence for us. When I first tried their beers, Dulcis is like, again, it's like one of those beers that's first comes out in its style in a market. It will forever have a very special place in consumers' minds and in the marketplace, and
and they still make it, which is great.
Beer. Yeah, absolutely. I haven't had it in a while, as it goes, as you know, and I mean, I don't drink anyway, but I mean, it's I haven't had it in many years.
You don't drink?
It's like, no, I don't drink at all anymore. That's why I'm not drinking with you guys. It's
okay.
Anyway, it's
respect.
It's from I bang. Yeah, it's I miss it sometimes. It's because I banged my head. I got a concussion, and since then I'm not able to. I can't have any alcohol. It's I think other people that have had concussions could probably relate to it. Yeah, the doctor said it you should be able to tolerate it eventually, but I don't think it just doesn't work, unfortunately. So I'm teetotal, man.
Is that a challenge? Like, I don't want to derail the convo, but is that a challenge being?
No. It's all it. No. I can tolerate a bit, but you're mostly smelling in the brewery anyway. To be honest, it's not.
Yeah.
So
it's like 80% smelling.
Okay.
Yeah. So getting back to wild beer, just really inspired by what True to Diable was doing. They were kind of the big one on the radar at around 2012, 2013, when we started to get into wild beers, experiment. And again, we had a lot of bad luck, a lot of non-results in the beginning. Couldn't get the Brett to throw funk the way we wanted to, and this and that. And we had to set up a whole other side of the brewery. So it was a big project for us at the time in 2014 or 13, whenever we started it. Another bottling line to invest in, and duplicate equipment, all that stuff. If you're going to do it, you have to kind of have a whole separate part of the brewery to do it in. And, so from the Quebec landscape, True to Diable was really really big influence. And there was, of course, Dunham was doing wild beers at that time. help me out. Who else? Obviously, à la Feu. Pit Caribou was getting into them, maybe.
Yeah.
Um,
no, would know more
who
about
else?
this.
Jude Ciel had a barrel program as well.
But in distribution, I don't know if were they distributing, or was that more like for their
not a
releases?
ton. It was more special
Yeah.
releases. Yeah, but like stuff that you can get on shelves. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, like shelf beer.
Not too many.
So it was.
Started getting into it
again,
shortly after, but yeah.
It's a lot of the inspiration once again came from the U.S. Jester King was kind of mind blowing. The stuff they were doing back, like still is. I'm sure I haven't had their beer in years again, but the way they were getting, the complexity they were getting out of fairly quick fermentations was really mind blowing. Who else popped up? Wicked Weed popped up as well a couple years later.
Right.
Back then, and so yeah, we were just the whole aroma profile from Brett was just kind of intoxicating, like in a good way, not in a literal way. It was just like, oh my God, beer can smell like a horse. This is crazy. Because I was around horses for a part of my childhood, so the smell of a horse or a barn is instantly familiar, and I guess on some weird deep level, it's comforting to me. So the fact that a beer could smell like a horse and horse shit in a barn, and somehow that's a good thing. It's
yeah, I know.
What are we doing here? What is going on in this? You know, like I can literally remember having Tilcan, like, and one of the biggest aromas of Tilcan that I detect is dog shit in that beer. I don't know if anyone else gets it. But I get a good, strong coliform E. coli dog shit smell out of it. But it's amazing. It's amazing in that beer. It's not at all like, it's not a bad thing. And so we're just like holy cow. Okay, so here's a whole other subset of beers that we know nothing about or how to make. Let's just dive into this head first and see if we can do something. And the challenge.
Do you ever? Have you ever like I find myself doing this sometimes, where like I'll be standing next to the compost bag, and it won't smell good, but there'll be some weird smell in there, and I'll stick my nose in the compost bag, and I'm just like taking big whiffs, and it's just like some kind of weird fermentation going on, and I'm just like, I don't know if that.
This conversation is going to derail quickly.
Thank God you're not
separate the nasty from the interesting, even though it's like 90% nasty.
Man.
There's a 10% interesting.
100%.
You know?
That's
100%. Look at kombucha. I mean, kombucha can be.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many. You know, the SCOBY and all the bacteria and yeast that's in there. I mean, I had some. I remember, like, 5-6 years ago, drinking some beers by prominent breweries, Quebec breweries, wild beers, and drinking it and going, this smells like rotting fucking garbage. Like, how? Like, I'm disgusted and appalled, but I'm curiously like envious. Like, how did they get rotting garbage smell in their beer? What organism produced that? It literally smelled like a trash bin.
It's impressive.
So,
and that we all want more of it. I like the baby vomit as a personal fave of mine too.
Oh man,
gorgeous.
Oh, the butyric.
I have trouble with that.
Well,
it's disgusting. No, I can't do that shit. I've had it a couple times, and I think it's a bad thing. Whereas it's almost like the baby vomit is where it's like, whoa, that's where we draw the line. But the dog shit, the cat piss, the horse blanket, all that shit, that's beautiful. Let's go. So animals, cool.
Animalistic is good.
Human bile upbringing is not so cool. Poo.
Yeah, well, that's it. And I mean, the wild thing was, I mean, it took years to kind of start to be able to achieve some of those aromas and flavors in the beer. And we really had to kind of take our time with it. Like the New England IPA project, it was just like, there's no point rushing this. And it was kind of interesting and disappointing all at the same time, seeing the whole quick sour movement when it came in, and then like quick sour was a sour, and a wild beer was a sour, and they're all just sours, and they're all now kind of painted with the same brush, and it's like, ooh, really? Okay, because the quick sours, I mean, they're much less prevalent now, but a few years ago, like everyone was souring in their kettle and picking up, like you said, like the butyric and all these off flavors and aromas, and there's some, you know, pretty sketchy stuff going on, but to the consumer, unfortunately, it seemed like, you know, when it said sour on the label, it's like, well, but that's a sour that's like was aged in a wine barrel for a year and a half, and then it was blended, and then it was this, and then it was bottle conditioned with Brett, and and it's like they're all just the same to some people, and it was. I don't know. It's almost like that was almost where because it seemed like the peak of wild beer interest from the consumer was definitely like a good 5-6 years ago. I don't know, like when we first started releasing
5 or 6
Farmhouse Houblon, right?
5
Yeah,
or
I don't know.
6 years,
For us,
interesting.
I mean, wild beer was like, it was hot, really hot, like in 14 and 15 for us, and then what happened in 16 for me was kind of this big dividing line where New England IPA started its long reign, right?
And that affected directly, like that actually brought your wild sales down, like you think?
No, I don't think it was a cause and effect at all. I just think it was just a natural shift because there's new people coming into the market as consumers, and those new people were really being drawn, you know, understandably so, to these juicy, just absolutely crushable IPAs. We still have hardcore fans that buy our wild beers, but we produce less of them now. We're a bigger brewery, and we have much more customers than we did back then, and we produce less volume now with the extra customers we have. So if that gives you an indication. Now there's a lot more breweries doing wild beers. So like back in 2014, there was maybe half a dozen that regularly putting out wild beers on the shelf that we're distributing. And now I don't know what that number is, but look at the amount of breweries. So there's way more choice. But we've had to limit the size of our wild beers. And we're just a bit more selective about them. And to be honest, like, you know, it's a very important part of what we do. It's where we do all our barrel aging. We don't do any clean side barrel aging anymore, because we don't have the space, and we've had issues with infections in the past. Catherine, you know, we had some infection issues with that. We often get people asking us, when are you going to make your wee heavy bourbon? When are you going to make your Catherine? When are you going to do your barley wines? And we can't make those beers anymore because we don't want to do clean side barrel aging. It's too much stress. It's too much work, too much loss. Like some of those beers were complete write-offs on a yearly basis. So if the beer style doesn't work well for the wild beer program, then we just don't do it. So that's why in our wild beer program, we do things like Old Ale, which traditionally was a beer that had Brettanomyces in it, and it works well for that particular beer style. So like Old Keeper is an old ale with Brett, aged in barrels, in spirit barrels. It works as a fully fermented dry wild beer, and it's got a high alcohol level. So the beer doesn't come across as thin because it has, you know, no residual gravity. It's a boozy beer. But if you try and do that to a Catherine, an imperial stout, you're probably not going to like the result if that's fermented down to zero. Right? It's just, there's too much roast in it. It's just going to be really hard to balance that beer. Whereas porter, we released the Tawny Porter last year. There's less roast in a porter, so that actually works as a wild beer. So we're kind of picking and choosing now the styles that we'll do on the wild side, understanding that beer has to be fermented down bone dry before it goes in a bottle to be conditioned, because we don't want to have any surprises in the bottle at a later date. So we've really had to change our lineup and drop some brands that were like really popular at the time, and people, you know, continue to ask us for. So
something like Colorado comes to mind. I don't know. Is that something that you dropped as well alongside Farmhouse Houblon?
No, well, we produce it kind of sporadically. We actually just released a new batch of it 2 weeks ago.
Nice.
But we hadn't brewed it before then. like it was probably a full year before that we had brewed it. And again, we got Pacific Northwest hops in that beer.
Nice.
Fermented dry saison. Well, it has you know, we use different breath strains in it, so it's kind of a nice dry, very hoppy beer if you drink it young and fresh, and then after 2, 3, 4 months in the bottle, the wild yeast will start to interact and make their presence known. So it's kind of got an evolutionary character to it. So that's kind of one of the beers that has made it through these kind of changes in what the brewery is producing. There's things like Saison Rayé, which you mentioned before, which is our wine barrel blended saison, just a straight up saison aged in wine barrels between 1 and 2 years. Trying to, you know, blend different ages together. It's not like a Gueuze where it's 1 to 3 years old or 1 to 2 years old, and the older barrels obviously have more character. They've had some oxygen ingress, and they have different traits that we blend in for more complexity. That's a beer we'll always make. It's one we want to have available on a more regular basis on the wild side. And then we have our fruit beers, you know, cherry beers, pear beers, our fructus, which is these are all barrel aged saison for the most part, that are then, you know, assembled together and then aged for 4 to 6 weeks on fruit, and then aged in a bottle for, you know, 2 to 4 weeks before we release them. So those are the kinds of beers we're kind of focusing on the wild side. We're doing less dark beers. Occasionally we'll put out, you know, darker beers, amber beers like Old Keeper, or like we released one recently called Jalisco, which is an amber, or, you know, brown beer, brown wild beer aged in tequila barrels from Jalisco. So that was good. It was, you know, certain beer styles we think work well for spirit agings on the wild side, and certain styles like I said, imperial stout or maybe barley wine. We just don't think that they're a good fit for the program. So we just don't brew them anymore, unfortunately. But, you know, it is what it is. But
would you ever do non barrel aged wild beers on that side of the brewery again, or do you at all?
I mean, that's how we were doing it to begin with. It was all stainless steel, and the Brett was even only being added in the bottle, so the Brett complexity was only happening in the bottle conditioning. That was through necessity more than anything. And then once we got a bit more space to have barrels, we started running everything. You know, primary is in stainless steel, and then it goes automatically to barrels. The beers that don't touch oak, there's very, very few of them now. Colorado is one. We used to do one called the Brett Zest Saison, so it's just a low alcohol saison, and then it's infused with citrus zest and juice, so, you know, lemon, lime, and grapefruit zest. We haven't done that one in a long time, at least I think a couple years. That's one maybe could reappear at some point. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we definitely could. We tried. The Brute IPA phase went through our wild side. Remember that phase?
Oh, right, I remember that. Yeah,
yeah.
The whole 2 months or whatever.
Remember Brute? Yeah. Here's the funny thing on Brute IPA. We were one of the first to market in Quebec with the Brute IPA. Unfortunately,
I remember.
Yeah, we hitched our horse to the wrong wagon. But no, that was a fun challenge, the Brute IPA, because it was really causing a bit of a stir down in the US, right?
Yeah.
And it was this bone dry IPA fermented to zero with the help of enzymes, and then, you know, a sizable dry hop. But for us, enzymes are essentially, if you think of them, they're essentially Brett. They're super fermenters, right? So we cannot use enzymes on the clean side. Anywhere near our clean side beers, there will be catastrophe. We don't want them in the brew house. They didn't work that well unless they can be denatured through heat in the brew house. So we were adding them to the fermenter. That's where we're having the most success. So that was a stainless steel beer we did on the wild side. but technically it wasn't a wild beer. But we just treat it as such. And then, inevitably our brewed IPA would pick up a bit of a Bretty infection, after a month or two in the bottle. So we stopped doing that one. And we're just like, okay, that's a bad idea. Because once your equipment is kind of impregnated with Saison and Brett, you basically can't get it out of it. Gaskets and anything semi-porous, just forget about it. So even if you want a beer to have more of a clean profile, running it through the wild side equipment, you're going to pick up just a micro amount of yeast from your equipment, and inevitably you'll get Brett in the package, down the road. So we're trying not to do any kind of clean style beers with the Brett equipment.
Smart.
Yeah. So
I love it. I was gonna say, should I grab the last beer then, and we can? I know we're over
up
time
to you guys. Yeah.
Noah, you gonna do it or no?
I'm fine if you want to.
You good?
I'm gonna hold off because I have to be up at
Okay.
6.
Do you want to keep going for a second?
okay.
I'll grab the last one since I just finished my coffee type of thing. This is just getting started for me.
What time is it?
10:30. So we'll wrap it up. We can wrap it up quick. I just want to crack it since we're having all four on there. But yeah, keep going. There was the other question. Someone actually, you answered the question as well about, I was about to say, Beer in a Bottle just asked, do you do Brett in a bottle because it's impossible to get rid of the yeast from the tank? So you answered that. One question.
I don't know if I understood that.
Do you put the Brett? You said you add the Brett in the bottle, and he said, do you add it in
I think
the bottle?
originally he did, yeah.
Yeah, but you kind of answered it in the end by saying that you put when you use the tanks.
Originally we kept the Brett out of the primary fermenter. We just added it at bottling. But we were doing things completely differently. Now we use bottle conditioning yeast when we're re-fermenting our beers, which is it's kind of a clean yeast just designed to re-ferment simple sugar in the bottle.
Right.
And it's supposed to kind of settle out and kind of create a nice compact layer in the bottom of the bottle. It doesn't always happen, but that's another benefit. So it depends. If we have a beer where we kind of think maybe it could have used a bit more complexity or Brett character. Sometimes it's rare, but sometimes we'll add a bit of a fresh pitch of Brett to the bottling tank, and just to make sure there's a healthy, viable amount of Brett in there that can work on whatever's left in the beer. But normally the beer is kind of where we want it, where it's going into the bottle. So we just want a clean, efficient, robust yeast that can tolerate high levels of acidity, high levels of alcohol. It's a pretty harsh environment, and we do stuff to the yeast to help train it as well before we throw it into those environments. So,
gotcha. Okay.
Our methods have changed.
That makes sense. Another question that came up is, has the market driven you to brew a beer style you don't particularly enjoy making? So I'll be back in 2 seconds with the next one, but you answer that one.
That's a good question. That's a good question. Well, I don't know, man. I've never screamed so much as I have making New England IPA, but I love the beer style. I appreciate the beer style. I've heard brewers talk shit about New England IPA, and I get it. I know where they're coming from, and we were just sad more than anything when we weren't putting any out on the market. We're just like, oh man, what a bummer. But we've never, like, even when we weren't making them, we were never like, that's a stupid beer style, we don't like that. It's an unbelievable beer style. How they came up with the technique, like, it is the hardest beer to brew, I have to say. I have like I said, I've never screamed so much as I have probably working through the years of trials, and even on an ongoing basis. It's New England IPA is never a fait accompli. It's never a done deal, a sure thing. It's always like, does it need more hops? Should we have more hops? What's the aftertaste like? Is it burning? What's going on? Like there's so many things you have to do to make that beer drinkable. And ours are in constant, we're constantly trying to improve them. We know that we need to improve that. All of our beers, it's just a constantly never ending trying to improve our beers. We're not just brewing recipes going, yep, that's can't get any better, and there's nothing to do on that one. We're always changing one parameter. Okay, that worked, it didn't work. Okay, let's change this parameter. Let's try this. Constantly. Like, we're not 100% happy with any beers we put out. So New England IPA is the one that has given me the most like gray hairs for sure over the last few years. But it's just because it's unbelievable if you think about it. It really is unbelievable the volume of hops that get put into that beer, and the fact that at the end of it all, it's still something drinkable. Because like I said, I mean, if we tried to do that in 6-7 years ago with what we knew then, it just wouldn't have worked. You just can't do it. There's so many things you need to do in the brew house with your water and along the way to make that beer drinkable. It's just kind of unbelievable that people figured it out. And then, but it's a lot of work to try and figure it out for yourself. It's a lot of work, and it's hard. But yeah, that one. So, but other styles that we've had to brew, well, you know what? I mean, it's kind of like you're excited to brew a certain style the first time, and sometimes even for the first couple brews, and then sometimes you're just like, yeah, no, I'm over it. It's just not what
We're done here.
Was thinking. Yeah, it's just like, fuck that beer. We're not doing that ever again. And that beer goes away and it never comes back. So that's the thing. Like, we have the luxury of, like, we're all small microbrewers. We can essentially do what we want, and we want to enjoy what we're brewing and be enthused about it. If a beer isn't turning out the way we want it, or we just kind of like, you're just over it. Like how fast the market was over brute IPA was just,
it's crazy.
It was funny. It just made me laugh. I was like, damn, yeah, we're over it too, and the market's over it. It's like, we're all over that, like, in short order. And it was just like, to hell with that, and you'll never see that beer from our brewery again. And that's the way it goes.
Yeah.
But the run up to it was super fun, because it's like you're reading about it in the magazines, and it's like, oh, there's this shit happening in California, and it was at San Diego at a brew pub, and it's just like, people, it was like the next coming of IPA, and so you got to read about it. Now it's a technical challenge. How the hell are they doing this? What are these enzymes? When are they adding them? How are they balancing a beer that's at 0 Plato with all these hops? And so it's really fun. You get swept up in the challenge of it. And then you kind of do a few iterations, and then it becomes, it's okay, it's pretty drinkable, and then all of a sudden you're just like, yeah, that's the end of that.
Right.
On to the next one.
We're done.
But no, we have like obviously good feelings about the beers we brew, or we wouldn't brew them. Like, even like we're, I don't know, there's maybe 1 or 2 brands we're thinking of dropping eventually. Just beer styles that are not that popular anymore. But by the same token, it's like, we don't brew that much of them, that it's not like it's going to open up all this fermentation capacity anyway. So why not just keep brewing them? If you're only brewing them like every 2 months or something, like, where's the harm in that? It does provide nice diversity in the beers you offer, and to those those hardcore fans of this particular beer style, it offers them a choice that's widely distributed. So it's really hard to know when to kind of let go of a brand or a beer. There's your personal reasons, and then there's obviously the market. I mean, you can never ignore the market, but some beers you put out are more for you and something you get out of them, and then obviously other beers, there's more of a market pull, let's say, that's involved. So
Guillaume was saying,
so
no more bitter.
The Brett bitter?
That was a good beer.
He just said, so no more bitter, I guess.
I think that's what he means. Yeah. The Brett bitter they did.
No more. The Brett bitter. Yeah. Well, that's a perfect example. Again, like we're trying to figure out British beer styles. Because let's be honest. I mean, how many beers a few hundred years ago, if it was fermenting in oak, how many of them wouldn't have had Brett? Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
they probably would have all had Brett, right? So we figured a bitter, a nice estery British yeast fermented with Brett. It was kind of an interesting concept, and there were certain people that got it. They liked it. They appreciated it. But it's a little bit quirky. We admit.
Yeah.
It would be maybe more fun to move that beer over to the clean side and actually do like a real bitter, kind of like the beer that we first brewed as home brewers and that we drank, copious amounts of when we lived in the UK. Maybe try that. That would be kind of fun to come full circle and try and brew that style of beer, like a low alcohol bitter, but in a can.
I'm here for it.
Clean side. That's it. Right. It's been something that's kind of like, could we do it? Like, would anyone buy it? Like, we just don't know. Like, it's one of those things.
Probably.
It's hard to tell these days, really.
Well, I mean, dude, look at it's so driven by IPA and specifically New England IPA, the market these days. But I like the Pilsners because we've been saying, for a few years now, this year is going to be the year of the Pilsner. It's going to be the year of the Pilsner. And it never really, like, from our perspective, it never really panned out. Like, Pilsners are great. Like, they're a wonderful part of our portfolio of beers, but they don't come anywhere near the sales volume of Yakima or New England IPA.
Right.
But some of the ones we've done recently, like the New Zealand Pils, the NZ Pils, that's kind of like, I don't know, it's almost creating a bit of a bridge because those hops they're not like the Kazbek hops you guys had earlier with the noble profile and herbal and grassy, and they're punchy New Zealand hops. They're aromatic, you're taking a bit of IPA and you're mixing it with that base Pilsner, and that's a direction that is super super fun and interesting, and is a nice bridge in both directions. Maybe for hardcore New England IPA drinkers, they could come over to the Pilsner side, and maybe the Pilsner drinkers could appreciate something that's a bit more assertively hopped. So personally, I'd like to maybe do a few more of those, and that one in particular seems to have been appreciated. So yeah, we'll see, right? Like,
for sure,
something sessionable for the summer.
I'm here for it.
Do you want to wrap it up, Craigie boy?
Yes, I know you folks early boys. So first thing, we need to get the thumbnail. So I'm going to take a screenshot.
Oh, right.
I'm going to hold up some products because, here for the marketing. All right, let me see. By the way, this double IPA is great. We didn't talk about it, but it's basically like the New England IPA, just ramped up. Nice and dank.
Which one?
The Lutine.
The Lutine. Yeah, well, that features Idaho 7 hops.
Oh, that's my favorite. I love that shit.
They're quite different. Yeah, they're quite punchy. Yeah.
You ready for the thumbnail? I'm going to take a screenshot.
Do you want me to do something?
Yeah,
specifically?
Yeah, do something entertaining. Whatever you feel is right. There you go. Ready? Are you ready?
Just look like a buffoon, maybe? I don't know.
Oh, that is gorgeous. Let me see. Oh, that is stunning. That is gorgeous. Idaho 7 hops. I love Idaho 7 hops. But no, Dan, this is great. What I was saying to you guys earlier and to Noah was that I know tonight we focused on a couple crispy boys, couple of haze, which is fantastic because I hadn't had any of these, and as always, I'm incredibly impressed by everything you guys doing. I was suggesting maybe I would be absolutely stoked to do this again in like the fall. We could focus on some of the other new stuff, some of the wild stuff, and do it again.
I'm sorry I didn't get you any bottles. Yeah.
Oh, bro, please don't apologize at all. I just appreciate you taking the time to do it. But I think this is cool. I definitely, you guys are doing some fantastic stuff. You actually changed the game in Quebec. it's great to finally get the story documented here on the podcast, so it's here permanently so people can hear it. But I think we should definitely catch up regularly because you guys are just always doing some awesome stuff, brother. So I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, man. Thanks to both of you.
Man, genuine pleasure. Where can all the fine, attractive individuals watching and listening right now find you both online? Whoever would like to go first. Dan, since you're in the middle.
Where can they what? Sorry?
Where can they find you online? Like, what's the website? What's your social media handles?
Instagram, Facebook is Micro Le Castor. Website microlecastor.ca. We're pretty low key on the social media. We really we don't post every day or all the time. We really just announce like when beers are coming out. We found that that's kind of what people want from us. That's where we see people getting engaged, is really when you have a new beer or a returning beer, seasonal beer. So that's really all our posts are about, is like, hey, this is out now, this is where it's going. So if people want to know where kind of some of the more limited releases are, the best thing is to follow either Instagram or Facebook, and that's how you'll stay on top of the news, really.
I love it. That's perfect. Uncle Noah, where can everyone find you, Matt?
On beerism.ca, the website, and on Instagram, beerism.ca, and Facebook, just beerism, and sometimes here with you.
Yeah, I think you're back again next Friday.
Yes, I am. It's true.
Noah's back in the building. Boys, stick around just for a sec. Afterwards, we'll say goodbye. I'll just wrap this up here. But, boy, thank you both for taking the time. This was fantastic. I really, really enjoyed it. Everyone, thank you as well to everyone commenting. It's a great bunch of comments. I didn't get to read them all out. I apologize because the conversation was really great, so I didn't want to cut it off. So no disrespect, but I did bring everything up on the screen so people can see it. Everyone, thank you so much for watching and listening. If you enjoyed the episode, smash the thumbs up, hit subscribe below, hit the notification bell so you know when the new stuff drops. Follow us on social media at BAOS Podcast, and check out the long form audio because you can hear, look at these pretty guys right here. You can hear people talking about craft beer every week. We are back next, I think, Thursday and Friday at 9 p.m. It's a busy time. Check out our Instagram. We always post what it is. We'll see you guys next week. Peace.